Hello out there, and welcome to our public meeting for Thursday, March 5th, 2020. We will call this meeting to order. We'll begin by acknowledging that this event takes place in the Aboriginal territories of the Salish and Kalispel people. Would you please join me in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have any public comment on items not on the agenda or public announcements? Seeing none, I'll let you all know that our current claims list as of February 19th, 2020 to February 26th, 2020 by the Commissioner's Office totals $2,347,623.01. We have 3 public hearings today, and we're going to move item C up to the top of the agenda. This is on the resolution on the election for referral to the people of Missoula County for authorization of a local option motor fuel excise tax. We're going to do that first just because I know there are folks here to comment on that. So I'll give you a bit of background, and then we'll hear from Eric. So the bit of background on this would be a 2-cent tax on a gallon of gasoline. And what we would be voting on, Dave and Juan and myself, is not whether or not we should have this gas tax, but whether or not we should put this on the ballot and let the citizens of Missoula County decide. If we were to vote on this, and the vote will be on, well, we're going to vote, but if the vote is successful in terms of gas tax, and that vote will happen on Monday, this would then be on the ballot in June. In terms of how it works, this is 2 cents on a gallon of gas, not on diesel. One of the reasons this was a compelling thing for me to consider personally was because the 112,000 of us that live in Missoula County aren't the only ones who drive on our roads. We get 1.5 million tourists visiting us annually, and this may be a way in which we could capture some revenue from the tourists to help offset the impact they have on our roads. That was the compelling piece of it for me. With that, I'll let Eric Dixon, our engineer, describe to you some other nuts and bolts of this, and then we'll open it up for public comment. Eric.
Okay, so Eric Dixon, County Engineer for Public Works. This is the information that we provided at the first public hearing. In case there are any new attendees here today, just wanted to run through this a little quicker than we maybe did last week, but just to show everyone some of the information that we have available for the consideration in front of you. So we had, through cooperation with the City of Missoula and the MPO, which is the Metropolitan Planning Organization, last fall we contracted with a company that will be providing us with a pavement assessment for all of the asphalt roads in the city and the county. And this map is difficult to see, but you can see that just by kind of a general color scheme that red roads are good, and the colors as they get into yellow and green indicate where we have a lot of cracking, a lot of poor roads in poor surface conditions. So this was the first snapshot that they could send us last week, just the day before we put this together. So we don't have a lot of detail, but we know it's coming, and that will give us a better feel overall through the city and the county what condition our roads are in. But you know, it doesn't take a map like that to show people that are driving on our city and our county roads every day that we have a lot that are in bad condition. This is Beckwith Street out in Frenchtown, and we were able to use the Barca gas tax option last summer to conduct a complete reconstruct of this road. It had gone many years without any maintenance. We knew that it needed it, but things like this happen a lot of times in the spring, where everyone knows that our valley is covered in clay, and roads that are built on that clay, a lot of times when they have a lot of cracks, a lot of surface failures, the subgrade comes up through the asphalt. And so while we plan maintenance every year a lot of times we are forced to provide emergency services to make repairs like this. And it's really no different from the city. They have a lot of old roads. They have a lot of roads that are distressed. And they have even more issues because they have curb gutter sidewalk needs in a lot of places. They have a lot of cracking. They have as much need as we do, but they have really more to do. Where we have a lot of 2-lane roads, they have 3-lane roads with or a 2-lane road with a turn lane and curb gutter sidewalk, and they have a lot of the same issues that we do. So their roads aren't in a lot of better condition. But comparing our two agencies side by side, we each have about a $6.5 million budget. The city maintains 339 miles. The county maintains 452. Our numbers are a little different because of that 452, 242 miles are gravel. So it's very, very much cheaper to maintain gravel. So on an overall budget and an overall miles of maintained roads, you can see what our annual cost per mile of maintenance is. And so, knowing that we have a lot of roads in poor condition, we recognize that we're underfunded. And so we and the city each proposed what we think it would cost to maintain the roads at the current condition they're at, not really improve. And just to keep up with the failures and the problems that we have, you can see that the city is about $6.5 million per year underfunded, and we at the county are about three and a third of $1 million underfunded. So if we continue this current trend of performing very limited maintenance or even reactive maintenance for emergency repairs, that gap gets even larger. It's much cheaper to maintain a road with a chip seal to seal the road and keep the moisture out and the cracks under control versus a full reconstruct that is, by our cost, the last time that we did it, about $350,000 per mile to reconstruct a road, and it's about $30,000 for a chip seal. And the MPO has taken a number of surveys in the past just to see how important roads are and all the services that we provide. And this is their most recent, and you can see that a vast majority of those that were polled see that maintaining and repairing existing roads is a large margin of priority for them. So we have community support through the need. The question is obviously the funding for that. So as you can see, like I said before, we have about a $6.5 million budget for each agency. The estimated revenue that would be generated from a 2-cent gas tax based on, I think it was 2018 year data, which was the most complete they had, would gain about $1.1 million. So that would be split equally between the city and the county for adding about 8% to our budgets. And so with that money, it would go towards maintenance. It would go towards rehabilitation projects that we don't always have the capital for, but are much needed. And for a lot of our federally funded programs, we typically have a 13% match. So if we can use that money, either all of it or a portion of it, we can leverage more money to come in through federal grant programs. Back in 2017, the state legislature passed the BARSA Act, and that was an additional gas tax on top of the state gas tax, which I believe the current state gas tax is 26 cents per gallon. The BARSA funding was about half of what was requested by the Infrastructure Coalition and the local agencies in the city and the county. So what was approved in 2017 was a graduated tax that went from, I think, 4.5 cents up to 8 cents per gallon. And so that money is something that we have to use for projects. The base gas tax that we collect is about $320,000 per year. That is figured into our base operation budget. The BARSA funding by statute is to be used for projects. It can't be used for equipment. It can't be used for labor. It is actually to put on the roads for the residents. And so if we were to try to raise that same $1.1 million in revenue that the 2-cent local option gas tax would raise, if we were to maintain or rely on the current funding, which is strictly through property tax, you would see there that on a $300,000 home, we would need to increase property taxes by about $21 a year in the county and $14 a year in the city just to get that same funding amount. But by comparison, if you have a 2% local option gas tax for the average distance that people drive, that comes out to be about $10.78 a year. So clearly cheaper to go with a gas tax option, and that is also spread to everyone that drives and is not just a funding source that property owners are obligated to fund for the entire county and the entire city. And so you see some of those comparisons there, what a $10.78 per year impact would be. It's very minimal compared to what folks have to spend on a monthly basis anyway. So hopefully that is a quick enough summary to get us up to speed for any new attendees that weren't here last week.
Great. Thank you, Eric. So what we'll do next, we'll do a public comment. And then after the public comment, I'd like to report back on a meeting that I had and some staff had with some of our petroleum vendors and just let you know about what happened at that meeting. So we'll do proponents first, and then we'll do opponents. And I'm going to set a timer here, and we'll do 3 minutes. That sounds all right. So anybody on the proponent side, come on up.
Hello. Hello, Commission. My name is Bill Pfeiffer. I am the former Community Outreach Coordinator for Mountain Line, and I currently work for Montana Trout Unlimited. And I was asked to come and say a few words to you all today, not by Mountain Line, but by a friend. And so I'm here to speak in support of the gas tax. Having worked at Mountain Line for nearly 6 years, I can say that funding projects in general is really something that is extremely important and something where we just have very few tools with which to use. And I think a lot of cities our size in Montana are at a disadvantage because of that we're not able to raise money locally very easily except through property taxes. And I think this is an excellent way for us to capture revenue from the many people who come into Missoula every day from places out in the county and put wear and tear on our roads, use our infrastructure, and then happily, after they do their shopping, get back in their car and drive back to their small town where they just don't really have the same kind of needs that we do here. So I really encourage the Commission to take action and make this happen because I think it's a really valuable tool that can be leveraged not just for these specific projects, but it can also help free up funding that is really very, very badly needed for other projects. So that's it. Hope you have a great day. I got to get back to work. Thanks.
Thank you for coming.
Hi, I'm Heidi West. I'm here as a representative of the Missoula City Council. On Monday night, we passed a resolution basically in support of your resolution to put this on the ballot for the Missoula County voters. As you know, our local governments, both on the city and county level, as well as our public school system, is primarily funded through one funding source, and that's property taxes. We're incredibly limited on how we can fund things on a local level. This would be a somewhat more equitable tax based on use, and it would also capture the revenue from folks that don't live in our community, but definitely have impacts within our communities. So, and that, also open up potential additional federal funding and have a fund that's just dedicated to road repairs and maintenance. And at its very basic core, I think we are all believers in the democratic system, and that when we have the opportunity to engage the public and put issues to a vote, that we should allow for that participation.
Thanks, Heidi.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Abby Huseth, and I work with Climate Smart Missoula. Our mission is to engage our community in climate actions, catalyzing efforts to reduce our carbon footprint and build a more resilient Missoula. And when we talk about our community's carbon footprint, we know that based on a recent emissions inventory, that the biggest single source of carbon pollution in Missoula is transportation, over a third of our footprint. So improving and modernizing our transportation system is essential to reducing carbon emissions. We particularly support efforts to increase non-motorized transportation like biking and walking, and the use of transit, which benefit all Missoulians by reducing pollution and congestion. The city and county are on the right track in working to make this community more bikeable and walkable, and we're fortunate to have such a connected and accessible transit system, especially for a community of our size. And while we as a community need to invest in the infrastructure to support biking and walking and transit, we do still rely on cars, we hope increasingly electric ones, and need to continue to invest in and improve road infrastructure. This investment, especially when done with multimodal transportation in mind, can actually improve safety and access for bicyclists and pedestrians and reduce costs for our entire transit system. One example, road conditions and real and perceived safety issues make a huge difference for bicycles and pedestrians. And road improvements such as improved crosswalks, better separation between bike, pedestrian, traffic, and vehicles, and traffic calming measures help encourage non-motorized use. As our city and county continue to grow, we need to continue to invest in and improve our transportation system to meet our local needs and maintain the quality of life that makes our community so attractive and vibrant. The funds raised from a local gas tax would be local funds, locally controlled. I urge you to support this resolution and put it on the measure on the ballot, and let our community have say over how to meet our needs here of all our road users. Thanks.
Thanks, Abby.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Ryan Salisbury. The city of Missoula and Missoula County faces a lot of challenges as our community grows. One significant challenge is maintaining our roadways. Let's face it, our collectors and arterial streets are not getting any younger. And what we're also seeing is we live in a community that promotes bike transportation. We have a bus system, so there's alternate ways to get to work than a vehicle. So, and we also have electric cars, and that results in less fuel consumption and less revenue generated off of that gallons of gas that are used. So we've got a declining revenue, and in the meantime, we've got increased labor costs and increased material costs to maintain our roadways. And I see the gas tax as an alternate revenue source to bridge the gap between the need and what's available to maintain our roads. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Denver Henderson. I live at 1720 Cypress Court. We all wear a lot of different hats in our community. I'm here simply as a private citizen to offer support for the proposed gas tax. I appreciate what the sponsor is trying to achieve. I also appreciate the difficult position that the county's in. On the one hand, citizens expect basic services, things like road repairs, bike lanes, sidewalks, lighting, and other kinds of infrastructure. On the other hand, you're very limited in the tools that you have to raise the revenue and provide these kind of services. A 2-cent per gallon gas tax is a creative solution to meet these ends. Now, the cost of a gallon of gasoline is largely determined by private and foreign markets that are outside of our control. That cost fluctuates constantly throughout the year, and when the cost does increase, consumers and taxpayers do not see any added benefit by paying more at the pump. This proposal ensures that the county will be better situated to be able to make those investments long into the future. The added benefit of being able to leverage local funds to access significant federal resources cannot be overstated, nor can the added revenue that can come from out-of-state visitors. It will account for roughly 40% of the funds raised. That's absolutely huge. The alternative is to live with a current funding gap that is only going to grow wider and more costly as time goes by and our roads become more degraded. More to the point, the cost to rebuild and replace those roads will be borne by future taxpayers and future drivers. Bad roads, uneven pavement, and growing potholes also have a cost to private citizens. The incremental wear and tear on our vehicles increases our maintenance cost, and it decreases and reduces their resale value. This is a cost that many workers in Missoula County cannot afford to pay. For low-income workers and their families, when they cannot make ends meet, the result is a gradual decline into poverty and private debt, a cycle that they will struggle their entire lives to try and escape. Many workers in Missoula County are struggling to get by as it is, and while I am concerned about the regressive nature of any sales tax, I also recognize there's a very real cost in doing nothing. Now, we cannot control or predict what the future legislature may or may not do. I would remind us it took multiple legislative sessions with lots of partisan bickering and gridlock and eventual compromise that gives us this opportunity. That window is open today. It may not be open tomorrow. The responsible thing to do is to use the limited tools that we have available to make the wise investments that we need, investments that benefit both folks in the city and in the county. It is the definition of stupidity not to use this opportunity in front of us. Not doing so will only cost us more in the long run. Lastly, I want to make a broader point that folks who live in the city, pay taxes in the city, are also constituents of the county. We pay property taxes, we're affected by the decisions that you make, and we deserve an equal right to representation. Frankly, I find it offensive that some folks would argue that because they have not formed a municipality, that county government exists solely for their benefit. This is wrong, it is selfish, and it is counterproductive.
Gotta wrap it up, Denver. Thank you.
That being said, thank you for your time. I hope that you pass this referendum on to the voters and let them decide. Thank you for
Thank you.
your time.
Any other proponents? Okay. Opponents?
Good afternoon. My name is Kathy Whitman, and I'm a legislative candidate to represent the people in District 96. I understand that this meeting is to address putting this information on the ballot and not necessarily discussing the tax itself. That being said, others have talked about the actual tax situation as well, so we'd like to put our 2 cents worth in. I've been canvassing the area, and I've been listening to the constituents. The residents in this area are expressing their concerns that they are being taxed out of their homes. They're being taxed here, taxed there. They're digging deep into their pockets. They are paying all the taxes that are coming up not only in the city but in the county as well. Their property tax was increased dramatically this last fall, and now they're being asked for more taxes. The gas tax, the tax for fairgrounds, tax for an ice rink, and then, of course, the potential optional sales tax. It never stops. Their taxes are being taxed upon taxes, and we want to know, when will this end? Pennies are dollars, and they will come out of our empty pockets. The gas tax may be only 2 cents per gallon, but there always seems to be some special tax that the county commissioners and the city council come up with to make the residents dig even deeper into their already empty pockets. When these funds are rerouted and you run out of money, what will be the next tax that you will need to assess on our residents? You, the county commissioners, have not proven any fiscal responsibility in the past with the tax money that the residents have given you. Comments have been made that the cost is not an issue. It's only money. It is only 2 cents, but it is an issue. And our hard-earned money is our hard-earned tax money. And it's been stated by the commissioners that this 2-cent increase will not address all the entire repairs and maintenance needed. So where will the other maintenance money come from? More taxes? But then, of course, that's only other people's money, and maybe that's not of a concern. The calculated average cost that you stated as 10.78 appears to be more on the residents that live close in the city limits. There are others that live out in Huson, Frenchtown, Lolo, Clinton, Sealy, Lake, Bonner, Condon. They all drive many more miles than what you're assessing. These residents fill their gas tanks up many, many more times than you're estimating. This will directly impact them unfairly. And then we want to know, what about the snowplow businesses, the lawn mowing businesses, the delivery product businesses that all have to be increase their businesses because of the extra tax? You're refunding the potential gas for boats and recreational vehicles, but how about refunding the people that are the local residents, the people that this is really impacting? Businesses depend on their gas for their business. They're directly impacted negatively, and that will be passed on to their customers. We want to know, we want to know if you'll start looking seriously about responsible budgeting instead of looking for additional taxes to the residents. I hope the commissioners will think long and hard about the irresponsible spending and excessive taxation. We need to look at this bill again, or this movement again, and then rethink about how it is that you want to get it. Taxation is not the way to go. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good afternoon again, Commissioners. Earl Allen from Tura. I was here last week and told you I questioned the math and still do, just to be honest. I agree with the candidates' comments about the folks living out of town paying more than the estimate. One thing I would like to point out on that, where it's come up is the extra property tax money versus the gas tax money. So even if I went with an $11 figure on average per driver, well, my house, that's 2 drivers, soon to be 3 as soon as my son, God bless us all, starts driving. So, you know, that's 33 at least for my household. So when I look at property taxes that might be 14 versus paying 33, there's a difference to me in my own personal budget. So I think of things like that. You know, I'm one of thousands of commuters who drive in and out of town, and it's been said here that, yeah, we put wear and tear on the city stuff, and then we take off out of town. And okay, well, the one thing I'd like to point out is commuters are part of what makes this community work. The people who drive in from out of town add value to the property that's in town. Add value, create a reason for business to be here. So let's not discount that as we're thinking about this. Some of them are the poorer people in the county. They can't afford the taxes in the city. We all get that. But they add value. So let's not discount that. The other thing is, one of the reasons why I pointed out to you last week that I'm a direct constituent of yours, and I know somebody may be offended by that, I realize that you folks represent people in the city too. They're in the county. My point in that is the folks in the city have another layer of government, another set of representatives, another lobbyist in Helena. I don't. I have you 3. So that's why I appeal to you to think about this. And finally, I don't see this as a binary choice between gas taxes and property taxes, care or not care of the roads. Even, you know, I'm sure it'll come to the point where somebody will say, well, we'll have to cut services if we don't get more taxes. I don't see it as that. I think there's some linear things to do. I think there's some creative things which you folks have already been doing as far as getting federal grants and and applying for things like that. There's been some successful things have been done. I'd encourage you to continue to be creative like that. But I also want to remind you, just as the candidate said here a few moments ago, the people who live outside the city limits feel like they're getting taxed heavily. They feel like and this is me talking to my neighbors out east of town. They feel like they're getting taxed heavily, that they're the ones subsidizing what goes on in the city. And they look at things like bike lanes and bridges to nowhere and that sort of thing, and it's frustrating to them. And so, this to them looks like just another tax. They don't buy it that the out-of-towners are going to pay more and it's going to save us. I mean, the Organization of Realtors, I got to look at their charts that came out when they were presenting things to the city council, and they combined a lot of answers, which makes it look like it's really positive. But a friend of mine out in Frenchtown got one of the survey calls, and he said he was almost cajoled into thinking that this would be like a property tax reduction. So honestly, as far as putting it on this ballot,
We got to wrap it up, sir.
I will.
Thanks.
Last sentence. I don't think you're ready to go. I don't think you've done enough outreach and enough homework. So we're taxed enough already. Thank you very much.
I'm Alan Alt. I'm a candidate for the Missoula County Commission. I echo what we've all heard here today, but I'd like to add a couple more things. First of all, I don't think I would want to ride a bicycle from Tura to St. Pat's or from Condon to St. Pat's. That's just not the way to go. I think instead of trying to pass on another tax to the people, and that's what this is, you should spend your time looking at ways that you can reduce spending in other areas, be more efficient in other areas. And with that, I've gone to a lot of the outlying towns and talked to the people. And the one thing that I hear from them is, as far as taxes, enough is enough. The people are fed up with this. That's the one thing I hear from everybody that I've talked to. So, thank you.
Hello, my name is Brad Longcake. I'm the Executive Director for the Montana Petroleum Marketers and Convenience Store Association. I want to thank Mr. Slotnick for taking the time the other day to meet with me, as well as some of our other members, to try to discuss some of the challenges that we see from our perspective on why this particular local option gas is not a viable option. He was grateful enough to bring in a number of members, and so I want to acknowledge the fact that he took the extra time to do that. Unfortunately, I do stand before you today and still in opposition. Some of the challenges that we see with this, again, is in some, a lot of these comments have been brought up, is the fact that it seems like it was a short process, very rushed. We only had about a week to get public testimony, and as many of the members had mentioned, I'm not sure if a lot of the citizens of Missoula County know that this is happening, or they'd be here pro or against to at least provide their information. The other problem that we see with this is there's a lot of questions and a lot of discrepancies in some of the numbers that other people have mentioned, and I can give a couple examples. If you look at the total gallons that are sold in Missoula County, which is very large, what you have to keep in mind is that Missoula has a terminal, and what that means is it's a focal point for where gallons are sold at a wholesale and distribution level. So a lot of those gallons that are purchased in Missoula are not for Missoula County. They could be different communities, different counties, even different states. So unfortunately, the original number that you're basing that off of, I think in my mind, is anywhere from 20 to 30% higher than what we're anticipating according to what MTT has provided us for information. Another point of contention somebody brought up, was it's on the board as well, is the miles driven per citizen. That's a national average. Montana's very spread out. I myself have multiple vehicles. I drive more than that. I don't have any vehicles except one that's even close to 25 miles per gallon. My vehicles are older and I have multiple trucks. So I think the economic impact that's going to be on each individual citizen is going to be higher than that 10.78. And as what somebody else pointed out, I have myself, my wife, and again, a child that's going to be close to being a driver. So I have to take that number times 3. Somebody had brought up that 40% of this is going to be paid by the tourist. Well, in my mind, a tourist, and what that gentleman had said, was that's an out-of-state resident. Well, the way a local option works is you don't have to be an out-of-state resident. You could be from a different county. It could be your family. It can be your neighbors. It can be your grandparents from out of town driving in. It's local sporting events from people coming in and out. This is going to capture everybody coming in, and we can all agree on that. The part that we can disagree on is the fact that the burden of this is going to fall on Montana citizens and not as much of the out-of-state residents has been stated. The other concern that we have is what is the actual administering cost to do this, right? As you can see, it's very complicated. There's a lot of moving parts. That the burden's going to fall on the county treasurers to make sure that they're able to capture all this data and collect it all. And then on top of that, when you throw in a rebate, if you fill up your lawnmower, your chainsaw, your boat, any vehicle that's non-road use, you're entitled to a rebate. Well, that just seems like a very arduous process for whoever that end person is that's tasked to do that. I empathize with the cities and what you have to do. It's a very challenging task. I don't think anybody argues about that. From a petroleum standpoint and a C-store owner, we supported the local gas tax, the statewide gas tax because it's even across the board. It's hard to run a city like what you're doing. It's hard to run your family. It's hard to run a business. There's always inefficiencies that can be identified. There's also different things that you can look to maximize the overall performance, and that's what we would hope the city would do. We're not against the fact that people want to have good roads. I think even if we gave you $10 million, people would still complain that the roads are not good. And so I think that's a challenge, is that at the end of the day, this particular mechanism is not the appropriate way to achieve the goals that you're wanting to achieve, because at the end, it's just going to be a tax layered on top of a tax on top of a tax. And with that, I appreciate your time. And again, I want to thank Mr. Slotnick for his extra time that he put into trying to figure out a creative solution. So again, thank you, sir.
Thanks. All right, if there's nobody else, what I'd like to do is try and do my best to recap what happened at our meeting the other day. And I'm glad Mr. Longcake is here. So if I got something wrong, please, I'm just going to go for a recap. So we had, we invited all the local petroleum vendors and C-store operators, and Mr. Longcake called in from Helena and just had an open discussion about this. And my best understanding is that the main concern, as Mr. Longcake noted, was the lack of statewide spread of this. So basically, this comes down to an issue where you have a gas station, convenience store, close to a county line. On Missoula, on one side, they'll have a 2-cent gas tax. On the other side, they don't have a 2-cent gas tax. So the concern were for gas stations that were close to a county line. Well, we have a couple of them in Lolo. The nearest gas station, the ones in Lolo, are in Florence. So it's about a 15-minute drive there and back. And the concern was not that consumers would choose to drive 15 minutes out of their way to save 2 cents. The concern was that the gas station owners would absorb that 2-cent cost, keep their price the same, so no one would know that they had changed their price, basically, and then their profits would be cut into. That was a concern. It was also pointed out in that meeting that most of the money generated by the gas station convenience store owners in terms of profit was from the products sold within the convenience store, not the gas. That the gas was kind of a way to get people there, but it was the stuff inside the store that actually generated the money. And there was also some concern voiced for rural residents, let me see if I'm getting anything else. Oh, also there was concern around, as Mr. Longcake just pointed out, around the administrative costs of this. We were able to have Tyler Gurnant at our meeting, who's our clerk and recorder, for lack of a better word, our tax collector, and the person who would handle this administration. And in response to that, Tyler said he felt like his office could absorb this with minimal effect in terms of cost. We also wanted to point out that if we put this on the ballot, and that's an if, and then another bigger if, if the voters of Missoula County were to pass this, and this is ultimately up to the voters, not up to us. If the voters of Missoula County were to pass this, say this right. I'll make sure I got my train of thought here. We could come up with a way. We would investigate a way to make sure that people who were low-income folks who drove lots of miles could get a rebate back. And we have to figure this out, but we would put real effort towards investigating it because we hear from people who live far away, have to drive a lot, and don't have a lot of money that this could unduly affect them. So we would investigate a way to address that. We'd also investigate a way to deal with people who buy gasoline for their boats. Did I get the recap right? There's Mr. Longcake back there. Do you think I got it? That was my level best to get at what was said.
No, and again, this is Brad Longcake. I thought that was accurate. I mean, I think the challenge that we have, you're pointing out the 3 stores in Lolo, it's not so much you're just identifying 1 or 2 or 3 stores. It's the fact that putting those stores at a competitive disadvantage. And the end point of what this was, if I'm understanding correctly, is you want the end user to pay the fee. And what the distributors were talking about was the fact that if you have a donut shop on one side of the street and another one on the other side, and there's 5 cents or 10 cents or 2 cents less, people are smart. They go where the buys, they go where they like to do things, and those small incremental differences make a difference. And that's the point, is we're trying not to put our own or the same business entities in direct competition with each other when there's other methodologies that could be used to do that. So I think that captured it.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks. The last piece I got from our clerk and recorder was that if we were to put this on the ballot, if the voters were to pass it, we would also work really closely with the petroleum vendors to come up with a way to do the accounting and make sure the money came back. That we wouldn't put this on them as, you guys got to go figure this out. We would work with them. Also, we would take time to do this. This doesn't have to happen immediately. We could roll this out. The idea here is to make sure that the people who use the roads pay for the roads, not to punish petroleum vendors. That's our recap. Sure.
I'm Nancy Burgoyne, and I am running for House District 98. And I have a concern because I have already heard people talking about what would be done with this extra revenue. What is it that you can guarantee, Mr. Slotnick, and the rest of the commission? How can you guarantee that these new taxes will not be used for a bridge or for a bike trail?
It's a great question.
Or for anything else, just for the potholes in our roads? Is there any way to secure
Yes,
that?
yeah, it's an excellent question. I feel bad that I should have said that earlier. Thank
you.
you. So by statute, this can only be 2 cents, and by statute, it can only be used to work on roads. So that's what we would do. It can't slide to something else. We can't redistribute funds. This is money collected on gas to use repairing roads. That's all it is. It's by statute. It's in a pretty tight box. So we're going to take this up again on Monday, and anybody is welcome to come give public comment again, and at that point, we'll vote on whether to put it on the ballot.
What time on Monday?
Thank you very much. 10 o'clock on Monday, and that'll be in room 206. Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. Ann, are we going to be doing that here? Thank you very much. I'm sorry. I was going with our typical schedule, but we're doing a different schedule because this is a bigger issue. So 2 o'clock on Monday right here. So another opportunity for a comment and then a vote. And thanks to staff. And thank you all for coming to comment. I know you could be in a million other places today, so I appreciate that you'd spend your time on civics. Jeez. 3 o'clock. And is that, Ann, can we put that out on the website and make that out available to the world? Okay, 3 o'clock on Monday right here. Thanks. Okay, our next public hearing. This is on an amendment for initial project scope and fee estimate for our build grant project. Amanda.
All right. Amanda Henthorn, budget analyst for Missoula County, and Eric Dixon is also going to pick up a little bit of information for me as well. This is a budget amendment to account for the matching grant funds from the city of Missoula and Missoula County to get us to a 30% design phase for the build grant funds that we received. And we should be able to make some decisions about the project at that point, which I will let Eric address.
Okay, is there, okay, I'll try to answer or I guess provide information. So obviously we have the build grant, we've been working on for a while, and being a federally funded project, there are federal requirements that we have to meet. And so the grant that was awarded was $10 million or less than what was requested. So when we had that much of a change in budget, we had to really re-examine what the scope of the project was going to be. We had to figure out what we could build with the money that we had. So DJ&A worked with, was our selected consultant. They worked with us, with the city, with local developers, with utility providers to figure out what it is that we want to build with this money that we have. So in the federal funding program, in order to meet their requirements for the build grant and also to meet the National Environmental Policy Act, which is the NEPA process, they need to be able to review our proposed project at a point where everyone knows what's going to happen. And that's typically around what they call the 30% design. So at that point in the design process, we know enough to go to Federal Highway Administration and say, this is what we're going to build. This is, what we see the environmental impact will be. They can give us an opinion, say, yes, this is good, continue down this path, or they can say, no, what you're proposing is not going to work. So it gets us to a decision point where we can move forward. And again, with the severe lack of funding that we had, this is what DJ&A came up with. They have 60 pages of things that they're going to work on in the next few months. And with such a tight timeline for the build grant funding obligation, which is, I believe, October of 2021, the environmental review takes a while. The design takes a while once that approval is given. So it seems like a lot to ask for $1.5 million when we want to have that used up by the end of June or early July in order to get information to the Federal Highway Administration. It's an aggressive schedule, and it has to be for the timeline that we have. So I know that DJ&A representatives are here if you have any questions for them, but this is what it's going to take to invest in that $13 million.
Excuse me. I would just add that for the $1.5 million that we're proposing for this particular budget amendment, the county's grant matching funds out of that would be $510,000, and the city grant matching funds would be just over $1 million.
And this was all part of you said part of the match. This is what we committed to going in.
Yes.
Nothing new. This is nothing new.
This is nothing new. This is money we committed to when we applied for the build grant.
That for our guests here, we received, so this investment yielded us $13 million.
Does anyone from DJ&A want to say anything?
Unless you have specific questions, I don't think we have anything to add. I think Eric did a good job in explaining what it was. But yeah, so any specific questions, we can probably answer them. So.
Thanks, Chris. I'm all right. No, we would entertain a motion.
I move that we approve. I move that we approve the budget amendment for the initial project scope and fee estimate to achieve the 30% preliminary engineering phase of the build grant.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, our next hearing is on the Miller Creek View Addition preliminary plat adjustment, and Tim Worley will describe that.
For the record, I'm Tim Worley with CAPS, and this is the Miller Creek View Addition Phase 10 Preliminary Plat Adjustment. This is a request by Gilbert Larson representing Lloyd Twite. Miller Creek View Addition is a planned unit subdivision in the Miller Creek area, divided into 11 phases. It dates back to the late 1990s, and there have been changes over time in phasing, lot configurations, et cetera. With Miller Creek View, again, here's zooming in a little bit. We're talking about this development right down here, all owned by Lloyd Twite. The request is to alter Guinevere Drive and lot configurations near the end of Guinevere Drive. And the graphic on the left shows the existing preliminarily approved design in red. And then on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see the proposed modification in design. And what you see in orange and blue are already platted portions of Miller Creek View. So preliminary plat adjustments allow for modest preliminary plat changes. They're allowed when conditions on the ground change. They're considered minor in the context of the whole subdivision or the community. They have to be consistent with the original approval, and they have to meet essentially 9 criteria, including being minor in nature, complying with the regulations. They can't reduce protections provided by the regulations. These sorts of changes can't create a new impact or increase a recognized impact. They have to be consistent with the growth policy and the original subdivision findings of fact. They can't be the first in a series of adjustments. The adjustment typically stems from an environmental or contextual change, and economic changes can't be considered. We noted in this case that there is some common area affected, although the dedicated common area total acreage remains the same. This was noticed 2 Sundays in the Missoulian per the requirements in our subdivision regulations. We did send this out to agencies both in the county and the city and received no comments back. Staff's recommendation is for approval, and commissioners, there's your motion that the request to adjust the Miller Creek View Addition Phase 10 preliminary plat be approved based on the findings of fact in the staff report.
Would the developer's representative care to say anything? Okay, thanks.
Wait, Tim, I just have a minor question. So in the existing design, did the ownership change? What am I looking? So the southern portion of Phase 10, what was that before? Or right now, the existing design is, oops, sorry.
What the existing design shows is this sweeping curve of Guinevere Drive that was originally intended to connect back to Miller Creek Road just by way of a curve. And my understanding is that Lloyd did not own the property to the south
thank you.
originally.
Okay.
Now Lloyd owns that property to the south, so they reoriented Guinevere to make a right angle turn directly onto Miller Creek Road. But then a portion of the road continues to the property to the south.
So he now owns, so that,
yeah,
I
that
got you,
it can be
okay.
developed.
Thank you. I don't have any.
I'm good, yeah.
Seems to.
Pretty straightforward.
I recommend that the request to adjust the Miller Creek View Addition Phase 10 preliminary plat be approved based on the findings of fact in the staff report.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Thank you. Seeing no other business, we'll be done. Thanks. Do you have other business? Okay. I couldn't tell from that body language if there was other business. So. Okay.